In this tutorial, we are going to consider how you would approach answering this exam question. It's a described question and it's a 6-mark question. Now, my first recommendation would be to actually write this question down and write down what you think would be a good answer to it. Before you go ahead and do that, let's just consider what we're given to answer this question. We're first of all given a diagram called diagram Q5A, and we're told that this diagram shows us this thing called the intertropical convergence zone, which is what this tutorial is based on. It tells us that in January, the intertropical convergence zone lies in this area here, and on one side we have a tropical maritime air mass which is coming from the sea in an area called X. And we can see that that lies around about the equator. And as we head north 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 15 degrees, we come across an air mass called a tropical continental air mass. And back here we have it coming from area Y. Now when we look at our second diagram, we can see a map of Africa, and we can see a cross section. The area X is actually found in this area off the coast of Africa, and the area Y is found in this area of northern Africa. So this X and Y cross section is linked to this diagram here. What I'd now go ahead and do is see if you can describe the origin and characteristics of these two air masses. Okay, now I'll assume that you have answered or tried to answer this question. And before I show you what a model answer should look like, let's consider the two parts of the question. Let's first of all consider the origin of our two air masses. Okay, so the tropical maritime air mass is coming from area X. Now, area X lies off the west coast of Africa here. And that area is actually the Atlantic Ocean if we just zoom out a little bit more. So you could write the origin of the tropical maritime air mass is the Atlantic Ocean. You could also add that actually it comes from this area known as the Gulf of Guinea, which is an area of water that lies just off the west coast of Ghana, Togo, Benin, and Nigeria. So that's the origin of our tropical maritime air mass. Our tropical continental air mass was coming from here on our diagram. Now this area of southern Algeria and Libya is the Sahara Desert. So the origin of our tropical continental air mass, you would write the Sahara Desert. Now that's the origin. Let's consider the characteristics, and that's the type of weather we would see. Let's start with the tropical maritime air mass. Any air mass coming off an ocean is going to have lots of evaporation with large amounts of clouds forming, and therefore there will be high levels of precipitation. So you'd be wanting to say there's high levels of precipitation. The second thing you'd want to say is because it's coming from the equator, it's going to be hot. Now, not very hot, it's just going to be hot because there is a maritime influence which will cool the air slightly. So it's going to have hot temperatures. The final thing you'd want to say, because it's hot and there's an ocean here, the air itself is going to be very humid. So high levels of humidity. And that's actually a measure of how much water vapor is suspended in the air. And you would just say high humidity. So that's 3 weather characteristics of this air mass that's coming from this part of the world, the tropical maritime air mass. Let's consider, what about our tropical continental air mass, which is coming from the north? Right, now this air mass is originating from the Sahara Desert. So the first thing we should know about continental air masses is that they are going to be very dry. There'll be low levels of precipitation. And that's because there's no ocean to evaporate water from and to feed the clouds that would form in the sky. And because there isn't any ocean, there's not going to be any rainfall. So low levels of precipitation. Next feature or characteristic of the weather is because it's coming from the Sahara Desert. Now this is a very hot zone on the planet because it's in the tropics. It's got no maritime influence cooling it, so the air is going to be very hot. So it'll be very hot temperatures. The final characteristic you can mention is the fact that there is very low humidity, because humidity is obviously linked to the amount of suspended water in the air. And if water is going to be suspended in the air, there needs to be an ocean below it in order for that water to come up through evaporation processes. So the humidity levels will be very low. So let's finish off by looking at an answer that you should have written, and you can maybe mark the answer that you wrote yourself. In order to get 2 out of the 6, you must identify the origin of each air mass. So there is 1 mark for actually telling me that the maritime tropical comes from the Atlantic Ocean, or you might have written the Gulf of Guinea, or you could have written both. That would get you 1 mark. Second mark is the origin of our other air mass, the tropical continental or continental tropical. It doesn't actually matter which way you write this, but you should have told me it's coming from the Sahara Desert, and that gets you a 2nd mark. Now you're looking for another 4 marks in this question, so at least 2 characteristics for each, and I would recommend 3 just to guarantee you're not making any mistakes to get your 6 marks. So we have hot temperatures for our maritime tropical, and that's quite important, a slight difference because our Saharan Desert air mass, the tropical continental, has very hot. So we have hot up here and very hot down here. So there's a slight difference. That would get you 2 marks. Another 2 marks, we have high humidity from our air mass that is coming from an ocean, in this case the Atlantic Ocean. So it's high humidity for a mark. And our air mass coming from the Sahara Desert, because it's a continent, there's very little water vapor in the air, so we have low humidity. And our last characteristic, at this point, if we'd written all of this, we would actually have 6 marks. Final point, though, is that because it's also coming from the desert, there is very low levels of precipitation in this air mass. For 1 mark, in contrast, we have high precipitation from our tropical maritime air mass coming from the ocean. So this answer would get 8 marks. You'll actually see you can write it very quickly. You'll also notice there is no explanations for this. It is a simple set of statements. An air mass, where's it coming from? Atlantic Ocean, and hot temperatures, high humidity, and high precipitation would get you 3 marks, as would then writing Sahara Desert, very hot temperatures, low precipitation, and low humidity would get you 6 marks. And it's as simple as that. If you listen to my next tutorial, because I have another couple on ITCZ, we will explore describing weather differences or precipitation variations along this transect between X and Y. And then we'll also explore or look to explain those variations. So why is there a difference in the amount of rain experienced across Africa? So I have 2 more tutorials which will deal with 2 other typical ITCZ questions.